Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jan Larry, and I want to welcome you to the Truth Zone. We have some unbelievable guests for you this time. It is really incredible that we have Pastor Ron Lahan and his wife Bobbi. And I want to tell you that this couple is like a treasure to our whole fellowship because they actually have a gift of joy. When you think of like the Bible and some of the gifts that God gives you, everybody wants this pastor because wherever he goes, he brings the joy. I wish a lot of psychiatrists, could find out, about this guy, because I'm telling you, there wouldn't be any more patients. But anyway, he's found the secret to Jesus Christ, and God certainly dropped the joy into his heart. And so we want to ask you, Pastor Lahan, your life obviously wasn't always joyful. Tell us about the beginning of your life before you accepted Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior.
Well, it all started, I was raised in a very bizarre family because of my parents' backgrounds. My mom was raised Mormon, and my dad was raised Jehovah's Witness, and they both went through some pretty intense hardships in their religion at that time, and because of that, my mom was actually shunned. My dad was burned, and so he quit. And so to make an impact against their family, my mom became a bartender and my dad became a policeman, both of which you don't do in either of those. And that's where they met. And so I was raised with a torn on two sides, false religions, just mixing our minds up. We didn't know what we wanted to be, where we wanted to go. I liked the Mormons because they play basketball. That was fun. But by and large, because of that, my dad was an abuser. And I remember coming home to my mom. We had actually gone to a little skating rink. And I came home. My mom was sitting in the middle of the living room. And we had old hardwood floors, and I thought what she was doing was cleaning up something she had spilled. And when we got closer, we noticed she was trying to clean up her own blood. She was sitting in a puddle of her own blood because my dad had tried to stab her with the rat tail comb. They got in a fight, and she ducked forward, and because of that, it went into her ear. And so from then on, it just went even more bizarre. Got involved in drugs early. Stepfather came in the scene, moved us out of Arizona over to Florida and Louisiana, and then eventually started dealing drugs, and by 17 ended up in East Baton Rouge Parish Prison. We called it college. And so during my years of college, my time in college, I didn't find the Lord then. Nothing happened to me there. I didn't cry out to God. I do remember specifically saying that, God, if you'll get me out of this, I'll serve you.
That is absolutely incredible. And Bobbi, now Bobbi, his wife, is amazing. She has an incredible voice, and everybody in our fellowship loves this girl. And you know who she kind of even sounds like is that woman that everybody loves in the world. I think Adele or something is her name. She has a tremendous voice. But Bobbi, obviously, in your own life too, it wasn't all joy from the start. So tell us really what it was that brought you into relationship with Jesus Christ.
Well, for me, I was raised in a fairly decent home. My dad was military, and my mom, 2 younger sisters, and we just our problem in the house was my dad was never home. He was always TDY, he was always gone, And I'm pretty independent-minded, always was. And for me, what happened was because my dad was always gone, I didn't have that male role. I didn't have that at all. And so by the time I got into junior high, my dad was finally home for an entire year. But the problem was that now he wanted to be dad. And I was like, I don't even know you. So that caused my rebellion to rise really high. And from there, it was like this war all the time with my dad, because I was trying to get his affection, but it wasn't working. And so what I did in turn was I turned to the first one that actually paid me a lot of attention. And my dad was also, in the military life, alcohol is something that's very prominent. And so it was not uncommon for us to have house parties, and all of them would be around. And it was not uncommon for us to follow around and drink everything that was left from everybody's drinks. That's just what you did. But the problem was the older I got and the more frustrated I got, the more I drank. And so I drank because it kind of made things disappear, so I thought. By the time I was 16, I was involved with a man and spent 5 years with him, but it ended up a really, really bad relationship. And so in the midst of all of that, I began drinking more and more and more, because now I'm finding disappointment, not only in my dad, but now in this man who said he loved me, and I'd given everything to him. I'd given all my time. I'd given everything to him. And so by the time I was 21, I was a very, very, very angry woman. You wouldn't have been able to tell it looking at me on the outside, but on the inside, I was tore up. I hated my dad, and then I hated the man I was with for 5 years, and I actually and truly ended up hating myself, because I was doing things that I swore I'd never do. I would never do certain things, and I found myself doing them more almost uncontrollably. Like I couldn't stop because it would somehow make me numb. And there was a point where I would dream, in my dreams, I would dream that I was at my funeral and nobody came. And I was just inside, I was very lonely, very desperate, and built a lot of walls of resentment and hatred. And then it just got to the point where I just figured, well, you know what? If men are going to all be dogs, then I'm going to treat them like that. And so I was really very, very hateful. I was very hateful. You wouldn't know it, like I said, coming on the scene. But if you stepped just the wrong way, then that was it. And I was going to make sure I burned you before you burned me. And so by the time Jesus found me in the gutter of hatred and despair and loneliness that I was in, it was not pretty at all. I was totally bound in alcohol every day, as much as I could. And I didn't think at that point that I had any hope.
It's amazing, Bobbi, really, when you think of it, how God has our number. He knows when to reach us and touch our hearts and things like that. So why don't you tell us, really, starting off with you, Bobbi, how did God get a hold of your heart, and how did actually the both of you get together?
Well, how we got together was actually kind of funny, because I worked at the front desk of a hotel, and Ron was the sound man in a band that was traveling the circuit. And so that's actually how we met. I went into the bar after I got off work, because I had to work 3 to 11 because I was an alcoholic. And so I was like my dad. He was a professional alcoholic. He never jeopardized his career, never jeopardized anything. But from the time he was off to the time he went to work, or if he was ever on leave, he was drunk. And that's pretty much how I was. So I got off work, went in, and I see this person standing across the room, And they're bent over the soundboard, and the hair is like really. I thought it was a girl, and then as I came in the room, he stood up, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's a guy. And so that's actually how we met, and how I ended up getting saved was we hit it off, and in some ways it was kind of a revenge thing, but it backfired on me. And we ended up in Arizona, where he was actually born. And I'd been to a million churches when I was younger. He was talking about Jehovah's Witness and Mormon and all that. Well, for me, when I was growing up, I didn't want to become a Catholic because they had to eat fish, and I didn't like fish, so I was like, I'm not going to go there. And then I didn't know any Mormons when I was growing up, and then Jehovah's Witnesses, the only ones that I knew, couldn't celebrate their birthday or Christmas, and I'm like, oh, that's not happening. So, but I'd gone to a lot of different churches, and I just never heard the truth. I honestly never heard the gospel until I got to Arizona, and I remember going into a concert scene. And I can remember my first impression was, oh my gosh, these people are having so much fun. And people were laughing, and people were, and I'm like, I'm like, you can't have fun in church. But I sat through that concert scene, and I can remember the man that got up to preach at the end of it. It was like he had my number. It's like he knew everything about me. And I honestly went back and forth between really mad at him because I thought he told him everything. and at the same time thinking, oh my gosh, that's so me. How does he know that? Mm-hmm. And at that point, God himself made himself so real to me. I gave my life to him on November 24th, 1984 at 9:10 p.m. I'll never forget it, just simply because it seemed so real. And I got up from that altar, and when it became very real to me was a week later. We were sitting playing cards, and it dawned on me all of a sudden that I hadn't had a drink, and I didn't even think about it. It was like I said that prayer, and I told him, I said, I don't know what that prayer had to do with anything, but whatever it was good, because nothing could make me stop drinking, and I've been free from that for 28 years.
That's amazing, Bobbi, but that is the deliverance of Jesus Christ. When you give your life to him, he makes all the old brand new. So Pastor Ron, tell us, how did you, you spent how many years as a Christian, and just how it affected you, like salvation. What did God do in your life, and what are you doing now as well?
Well, it was 2 days before she got saved. I got saved first, which is the exception to the rule. Usually the women respond first, then the guy trails in however long. But I knew from a long time before then that there was something different, and that God had something different for me, for my life. And I always believed in God. I just didn't know anything about him or how to get to him. So that November 22nd, 1984, at a Thanksgiving dinner the church was hosting, I got a ride home. My sister had invited us. My wife wouldn't go because my girlfriend at the time, on Thanksgiving, you don't go to church. On Thanksgiving, you go get drunk and watch football. Right. And so she got drunk, watched football. I went to a Thanksgiving party or the church dinner. And at that Thanksgiving Day celebration, my sister set me up with two guys. They gave me a ride home, preached to me. I got saved, and that started right then a 28-year process. We've been saved since then. November 22nd is when I gave my life to Jesus, and for 28 years, just phenomenal. I got saved. I had hepatitis type B. I was dying. My liver had swollen. I was jaundiced. And in fact, when we walked in the church that Saturday that she got saved, I was still very weak, very jaundiced. And about a week or two after that, Joe Campbell came through, preached a revival, prayed for me. I got completely healed. Wow. And in fact, I'm supposed to be a carrier the rest of my life because it was type B hepatitis. But the American Disease Control made me go to their doctors. I have blood tests and samples of those blood tests still today that prove I'm not a carrier. I was completely healed. That started proof that, in my mind, I didn't really care what my family had told me, the mixed up friends had told me. I think what proved it to me was God took this out of me.
Yeah.
Nothing could do that. They are telling me, for the rest of your life, you're going to have this. And the rest of my life, according to them, was only 2 weeks. I got healed completely. God turned me around. And I remember it wasn't long after that, after I found out my healing, I actually went to the doctor, got a blood test, that I answered an altar call. And I said, to this day, I remember who was preaching, but I don't remember what they were preaching. But I do remember going up to the altar because the altar was very important. And for all of us getting saved, that was like our bed, man. We couldn't wait for altar call. So I ran up to that altar, not even responding to the preaching. And I ran up there and they were singing, "Create in me a clean heart." And I was weeping. And I remember I said, God, if you never do another thing in my life except heal me from hepatitis and let me live, because the devil told me, I really feel the devil told me I would not see 1985. I would never live to see that. And had I not got saved November 22nd, 1984, that might have been true. But that started a powerful transformation. We were in the local church 10 years. During those 10 years, got involved in bands, went overseas and ministered. We're in the Philippines and Malaysia, preaching Jesus, getting people saved. Unbelievable. I'm in Malaysia. I just have to tell this story. I'm in Malaysia. I'm a disciple. I'm a rock and roll drummer that still bounces when he drums. And so I'm bouncing, my hair's bouncing, my clothes are bouncing, and all the Malaysians thought that was just funny. And it was the Philippines. And so all of these Asians thought this was just hilarious, and so they were crazy. This guy's just nuts. Well, then they're praying. It starts raining. Filipinos they hate the rain. So they all ran up and crowded this gazebo to where we couldn't breathe. We're all standing side by side. My pastor's standing at the pulpit, and he's telling all the guys in the band, pray for people, pray for people. And so we start spreading out, and he said, they're going to pray for you. Just let these men pray for you. And I'm in a Filipino barong, and I'm okay, you want prayer? This girl comes up, and it was two events. One is the girl came up with a goiter. Her neck was even with her chest. And I said, do you want God to heal me? Heal you? Translated, she said yes. I said, okay, let's do that. Put her hand on it. I told her, put your hand on it. I didn't know, I'm not the evangelist. I'm like, okay, now what do we do? So I just put my hand on top of her hand and I said, leave her right now. And as I said that, her hand just shrunk down and her neck went normal. And the whole place, Filipinos, I didn't know this, but they all bounce up and down. So all around us was this group of people bouncing up and down. And so we have a miracle over here. And now I'm a man of God. Look, anybody come. I'll pray for you. You need prayer? I'll pray. You just name it. I'll pray. Well, this woman comes up carrying a baby that she had never seen his pupils because he was born without muscles around his eyes. He had no optical nerves, nothing. It was a deformity. He had eyeballs, and they were in the sockets. But the only time she had seen his pupils, and she was raised in California, so she spoke English very well. She told me the story is when they put little suction cups and bring his eyeballs around just to check him. But he couldn't see. There was no optical nerve. Nothing was happening. And so I said, well, you came because you believe God can heal your baby, right? Yes. So I said, put your hand over his eyes. So she put his hand over her little baby's eyes, and we prayed. And next thing you know, I still have the picture in my photo album at home. She takes her hand down off of his eyes, and the baby's staring right at me.
Oh,
just looking at me. And then
awesome.
Every movement he was following, and she just starts crying. Next thing you know, he's screaming and pulling on his ears and screaming. And so it quieted down because everybody's jumping all around. It was just wild. And then this woman, the mother, said, oh, I forgot to tell you, he's never been able to hear as well. And so what was bothering him was the noise. And so God healed that child his eyes. And I'm just a young disciple. That was prayer number 2. Prayer number 1 was when God healed me. Prayer number 2 was, God, I don't care what you want for me. If I can help people, I'll do it. And then from then on, began responding to altar calls about going out to preach. So 10 years finished in Globe in my mother church, and they launched us to the East Coast. Since then, I don't know how many flags are hanging in our church, how many pioneer churches we've ministered in. It's all about giving our lives for other people and seeing them transform, seeing them experience if God can do it for me, he can do it for them.
Wow. Pastor Ron and Bobbi, I really want to thank you too for your testimony. And you folks out there, seriously consider what Jesus Christ can do in your life. And for our second guest, we have Pastor Josh Shapiro and his wife, Deb. And when I think of this couple, I always think of that scripture, too much that there is forgiven, there is much love, because Pastor Josh has quite a testimony. And he is an amazing preacher in our fellowship. He has done a great work for God so far. And I really don't want to let all the cats out of the bag here. I want him to tell you all about it. But I wanted to ask you, Pastor Josh, why don't you tell us, what it was like before you were saved, what you were involved in, and really, how did God get a hold of your heart?
Growing up was a task in itself for me. There was very little discipline in my life. My parents got divorced when I was young. I basically rebelled and did pretty much whatever I could get myself involved in as far as trouble. Starting with little things like throwing rocks at cars or setting mailboxes on fire or stealing stuff from the local store. And it quickly escalated. At 12 years old, I started smoking marijuana and drinking alcohol. My life went downhill pretty quick. I started to sell drugs and I went really fast down the deep end. I got involved with a lot of older guys that were involved in selling drugs. They basically recruited me. I was a little bit crazy. Nobody will ever tell you that, though, if you ask them about me, I promise. And so that lifestyle it basically destroyed me. I thought that I was something that I wasn't. I lived the music, rap music became very prominent. Ghetto Boys, NWA. This gangster rap mentality lifestyle just was poured out through music and media. I became something that I was not. In a small country town, Harwich, Massachusetts, I became a wannabe gangster is the best way that I could put it, or a wannabe thug. Thought my life was untouchable. Marijuana and alcohol turned to stealing cars. It turned to cocaine, mushrooms, acid. I dropped out of school, got kicked out of school, went back to school, got kicked out again. Just very violent, rebellious individual that had no care for society, no care for the law, no care for myself. Ran away to Florida, lived in Florida, did the same thing there, 16 years old, living in West Palm Beach, Florida, away from home, just getting involved in drugs and alcohol there. And just a disgusting lifestyle. I didn't know it was disgusting at the time, but looking back, it's very shameful, the things that I was involved in and the people that I hurt. Maybe even some of you, and I apologize if I have, or family members of you. Growing up around here, I violated a lot of people through drug dealing, through violence, and I ended up in prison. I've been in prison 4 times. I think I got 6 or 8 felonies on my record, rap sheet probably as long as I stand. And I needed something different. I was going down a path straight to hell. A lot of my friends got overdosed or murdered. just tragedy after tragedy. And meanwhile, I'm in the middle of it, and I thought, you know what, maybe I'm okay. And you know what, I wasn't okay. I was destroyed.
But the forgiveness of Jesus Christ is quite amazing, and that's actually remarkable about how it all got turned around. So tell us, Deb, what about you too? How did it all start with you?
Well, my family, we moved here from Brazil when I was 7. And when I was 10, we had to learn the language and everything. Our kids, we picked it up pretty fast, and my mom and dad kind of had a hard time. But when I was 10, my dad was falsely accused, and he ended up going to jail throughout his trial. And they actually released him. I saw him, and he was deported shortly after. And after that, my mother really took a turn for the worse. Up to that point, my life had been pretty stable. Life wasn't always easy in Brazil, but I had good parents. They worked hard. They were always there. We had our issues in our family and things like that, but overall, everything was good. And then after my dad had left, suddenly my mom, she was working 3 jobs. She was raising her 4 kids, and she didn't speak the language, and she was very, very overwhelmed. She had some friends that introduced her to some drugs, and after that, within a month, I would say, our lives was completely a mess. She decided to leave and go to Florida, and things just got bad, like really, really fast. And I just watched that, and I knew what my mother was, and I knew what she became, and I really pitied her and felt sorry for her, but I decided in my heart that I was not going to allow that to happen to my life. And my grandparents were actually Christians, and they would always pray for us. And my grandmother's very faithful in prayer, and she would always pray every day. She always prayed for her grandchildren, her children, and I believe that those prayers are what spared me, because it would have only been a matter of time that I would have been doing the exact things that I so did not want to be a part of, the exact things that tore apart our family. I would have been involved in those things, and I got saved when I was 13. And so God snatched me right out of that just in time. And, in the short 13 years that I lived without Christ, it was just heartbreak after heartbreak after heartbreak. And at the age of 13, I was so overwhelmed that I felt there is no hope for my life. I mean, my life's just started, but yet at 13 years old, I was so broken that I did not have an answer. I did not have a purpose, and I had no hope. I wanted my life to end. And, that's where I was when Christ came and found me.
Now, I know you have a brother, Pastor Claudio, who also is saved and really going for God. But why don't you both tell us, starting off with you, Deb, how did really God get a hold of your life? What happened that made it all turn and, made you actually really want more of Him?
Well, I had been diagnosed with kidney failure, and the doctors gave me 3 days to live. And the first time I ever experienced God in my life was, I was in intense pain. I couldn't walk, anything like that. And my brother, he was the first one to rededicate his life to God, and he had gotten saved and brought me to his church. And so they prayed for me, and instantly all the pain was gone. Mm-hmm. I knew that I was healed. I went back to the doctors, and I had it was like nothing had ever been wrong. They couldn't explain it. They didn't understand why. And after looking at my kidneys, they saw that it looked like someone had done surgery, as if a doctor had actually done the surgery. That's how it looked. So it was an amazing testimony for them that God was my physician, and He had been the one that had done surgery. And even at that time, I wasn't a believer, but God did that to reveal Himself to me. And things got worse from there for me, but I knew that I couldn't deny the power of God. And so one day we were living in Florida, and my brother was serving God in Georgia, and I had had enough. And I grabbed my mom's paycheck, and before she used it all on her drugs and things, I bought 3 bus tickets, and I said, I'm going to Georgia, and I'm going to give my life to God. And if that doesn't work, then that's it for me. I have nothing else to turn to. And that's what I did. I left. My mom chose not to come. So at the age of 13, I left home, went to Georgia, And I gave my heart to Christ. And since the moment that I prayed, I found the answers for my life. Not everything was perfect. Everything didn't just happen, after that. But inside, I knew my purpose. I knew that I had fulfilled a hole in my life that nothing else could fill. And I had a peace, I had joy, I had a purpose. And even though, there were still struggles, I was complete, and God was very real in my life. And it's been like that ever since. Like, he's amazing.
Just can't outdo God, Deb. And what about you, Pastor Josh? Why don't you tell us, how was it that God got a hold of your life, which was absolutely amazing? Why don't you tell us about it?
The amazing thing for me about a relationship with God was I never did anything halfway. When I used to run on the streets, they actually called me Word because I would do what I said I was going to do. And I ran into some of the brothers from the church at San Diego's, and I was drunk, and they challenged me to come to church, and I agreed. And in the morning when they called, I said, "You got the wrong guy. I'm not going to church." And they said, "Word, you always do what you say. You need to go to church." And I came to church, and God had an evangelist here named Glenn Cluck. And one of my biggest issues in life, I think due to the fact that I rebelled from authority, was I clung to negative male influences. And I mean, when I say clung to them, I held those relationships with highest esteem and would do virtually anything for the approval of these men. And when God spoke through Glenn Cluck directly into my life, the exact words that if I was willing to serve Pastor Campo or God the same way that I would serve those men, I broke. And I thought of myself about the amount of times that people, told on me, and I went to court because people got me involved in things, and then they said, "Oh, Josh did it." And so I thought, you know what, maybe there's something here. Maybe there is a God, and maybe that God can even touch somebody as lost and broken and hurt and violated as I was. And I said, if that God's real, I'm going to serve him. And I've been serving him ever since. And at first, I didn't know what it was to serve God. I didn't know how to pray. I didn't know how to speak to God. I remember specifically, trying to fight through conversations with God in heaven and folks saying, "Oh, we need to pray." And I'm looking like, what's pray? I don't know what pray is, but just something kept drawing me. Individuals within the church kept calling me and encouraging me to come out. And Pastor Campo would be there day in and day out, and just watching his example, I got hooked. Just like I got hooked to running with these men on the street. I got hooked on these men that had a vision for God and what God could do. And I got delivered from drugs, crack cocaine and heroin and alcohol. I got delivered from perversion and sleeping around. I broke up with girlfriends and said it's not going to happen anymore. And I actually got a job, for one of the first times in my life. Mm-hmm. And you know what? The amazing power of God to take an individual as broken and lost, as terrified as I was, and to take that, high school dropout, ninth grade dropout with no job skills or ability, and start to be able to create an individual that actually could put sentences together and could wake up in the morning and go to a job and do the things that need to happen. It's impossible unless if it's God. And so I didn't have a choice when God touched my life, because I was so drawn by the power of God. I was so drawn by that change, that spiritual change within me. I was so drawn by the fact that something so useless as I was could be wanted to be used by something as powerful as God. And so as I gave my life to Jesus Christ and continued to serve, he brought the deliverance from the things that were simple, like the alcohol and the drugs. But what he really did was he untied all the bitterness and anger and hatred and remorse and regret within me, and he untied those things, and he allowed me to be free from the bondage of myself and anger from my parents and anger from broken relationships. And I would say I was saved and sane with the right mind, but Pastor Campo probably would disagree with me. But you know what? It's amazing all the things that God done, the way he's brought me, the individuals that have followed out of the wrong path, that are serving God. There would be nothing else that I ever could do in my life, and I'm going to continue on the path of service to God because what he's already done for me in my life.
Whoa, Pastor Josh and Deb, this is absolutely amazing. Honestly, what God can do in your life, it's incredible. So why don't you tell us, really, what's going on down there in Orlando, Florida? Tell us what God's doing in your life now.
It's been pretty awesome going to Orlando. I definitely have a desire to do something more for God, and I have a brain that kind of thinks outside of the box. We've seen some awesome things. We did a watermelon eating contest. It was pretty cool, and about 20 people showed up. I think 10, 12 people gave their life to Jesus. We're hitting the streets a lot, and that's not something that I'm not used to, so we get into it. I mean, we're meeting with people, we're touching them where they're hurt, we're praying with them. We're doing a lot of activities outside of the church, really striving to see people touched. We've seen some notable miracles. We saw one woman, she had a paralysis of her neck. The woman didn't even speak a lick of English. I don't speak a lick of Spanish, but God healed her through my English prayer, 100%. It was a wonderful, wonderful testimony. We saw a gentleman healed from hepatitis A and B. We saw a gentleman healed from issues with his shoulders. He had screws in his shoulders. We're seeing people that put the pills down, leave them down, which is pretty powerful. A lot of people stopping drinking alcohol. God's putting me in the place to touch individuals just like I was. And that's pretty cool, because if somebody reached out to me earlier, how much more could I have done for God than I've done now? And so I'm hoping that I can be that one that will reach an individual's life, that can reach somebody. And so Orlando, Florida it's amazing, the difference in people. There's people that are very well off, probably some of the wealthiest people in the world, and also some of the poorest people, a lot of immigrants. And so it's very diverse, but it's very awesome to see everything that God's doing there. Our first year we had 8 revivals. The longest one was 6 days. God's drawing people just to hear the word of God. And that God can use somebody, 9th grade dropout, with no, university degree, just a heart that wants to see people touched, and then see people touched through a testimony of a changed life and spiritual impartation from a little place on Cape Cod is pretty amazing, especially in the big scheme of things. When you put Cape Cod up against Orlando, it doesn't even compare. I mean, Orange County, the county that we pastor, is over 2 million people. Not the place where we are, but the county in a whole. The Barnstable County here on Cape Cod is probably 60, maybe, I'm not sure. But so it's pretty awesome what God's doing. We're very excited.
So thank you so much, Pastor Josh and Deb, for coming and sharing your testimonies. They are amazing what God has done in your lives. I really, pray God blesses you and your 4 wonderful children. Deb's an awesome mom. She's such a blessing. And God be with you as you go back to Orlando, Florida. And I hope you reap a great harvest. And I want to thank you folks for watching The Truth Zone. And I hope you tune in next week. God bless.